and welcome to this is FPC Sunday Live. No main show this Sunday, so it'll be just myself doing the fantasy show today. Ian Glendon should be back next week for next Sunday, so look for that. But yeah, today we're here to talk fantasy for a full hour, so from 11 right till noon. By that point, we should get the active inactive list, and that's going to be kind of the main focus once that comes out. Which players are out? I know there's big questions today. There's still kind of a question mark or a few big question marks, but certainly one in particular at the 4 o'clock game. So we'll address all of that. We'll talk some DFS, talk some lineup decisions at start. So feel free to ask any question relating to fantasy or not. But certainly the fantasy questions are what we're pushing today. And yeah, so I'll talk about some of my own sit decisions. And of course, if you have any said decisions, feel free to also let us know here. And yeah, well, I'll do my best. I can kind of go through what I'm actually going to go through today is I'll share my screen and show a bit of my process when it comes to deciding lineup decisions and kind of the metrics I look to evaluate and what do I use to make those decisions? Like what factors am I looking at? So yeah. So yeah, of course, again, feel free to join in any time with questions, and yeah, just we'll be here. So yeah, so I guess the first thing to address is again, like how do you make start sit decisions? And so that's so I know one of the, so I there are good factors to look at, but I also think sometimes some of so there's so many advanced stats out there, right? But ultimately, what we want is the player that's going to score the most fantasy points. So you kind of you start there, right? Like the first thing you look at is the fantasy production through the season. Like so far, I mean, this is week 7, right? So we've got 6 weeks of data to go through. So what are the players you're looking at? What have those players done so far through 6 weeks? What's their floor and what's their ceiling, right? What's the most they've scored? What's the least they've scored? I think especially knowing ceiling, what's the highest potential that this player has shown able to produce at? And then if you go from there, obviously there's a bunch of, again, I'll show you like all the advanced stats that I used for that. But yeah, so I guess that'll probably be the best thing to start with actually is going through as well as so again, I mentioned you can ask questions. You can do that here on the chat in the live chat here on the YouTube channel, Full Press Coverage YouTube channel. But you can also follow me on Twitter at Senra Says or the Full Press Coverage Fantasy Pod account. I am a co-host of the FPC Fantasy Pod. So that's at FPC_Fantasy Pod. For my account, you can see it here on the screen. It's at Senra Says. So yeah. So I'll just be sharing this and hopefully get as many views as possible. And again, I'll answer as many questions as I can. But yeah, like I said, the first thing I'll do is kind of go through and share my I guess it's a spreadsheet I use. I know I shared a spreadsheet last week, kind of showing the goal line guide. Obviously, I do that every week, so that's an important factor. But I'll also right now I'll share just something I'm using to kind of help me with matchups. I did it last year too. I haven't really been doing it up until this point, and really busy. And also, I feel like what I noticed last year was with less information, it was less useful early in the season. So I figured now we have 6 weeks, this type of data could actually help with those decisions. I found that as the year went on and the sample size became bigger and the numbers became more reliable, my decisions became better. So I didn't want to focus too much on these factors in the early going when it's really 1 or 2 games that kind of change the difference of that sample size and where players are ranked and where situations are ranked. Because you look at the player, but you also look at everything around the player as well. So yeah, so I will share that and 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 we can go through it together, and then and at any point if someone has sit start decisions, what we could do is I could actually plug the numbers and do the research to and show like where I'm getting all these sources from. So yeah, if that's the case, then I'll share that real quick. Just give me a second. All right, so if you see here, we've got so I've got a few leagues where I'm making decisions. Do color code, like colors, like makes it a little easier to see. So 3 different leagues. So what I've got here is just the name of the league I identify for myself. I know what these mean in terms of like, okay, these are the scoring settings. This is how many players started, but what I'm looking for is, and then list the players, right? And then, context. Okay, do I need to start 2 of these 3 or just 1 of these 2? Or, this is the same league here, and it's just, okay, if I, really the decision there is J.D. McKissick, right? And it's relying on, is Antonio Gibson going to be in or not? Because if Gibson's out, I think McKissick is an automatic start, like where he's not being decided. If Gibson's in, that's what this chart is for. And I got to start 2 of these guys. If Gibson's out and I'm playing McKissick, then those 3 wide receivers, I can only start 1. So it's kind of how I divide it there. But what we got here are, first off, the opponent the team is playing, just so I get that easy reference when I'm looking. But then, as I mentioned, fantasy production is important. So floor and ceiling. What's the least that this player has scored this year? What's the most that this player has scored this year? Defensive rank. And this I usually get from whatever website is I'm on. Notice here, Sleeper doesn't actually have this anymore, where they show the matchup rankings. They don't actually do that. So I don't have that for Sleeper. Feel like some of the other stuff factors into that anyway. So I like it when I have the information, but if it's not there, it's not detrimental. But yeah, the whatever's on this, like based on specifically the league scoring setting that you're in, because everything is going to factor that to the fantasy points scored in that particular league. What are the defenses allowing? How do the defenses rank on whether they've allowed the most points to that position specifically? We've got DVOA, so defense adjusted value over average. And this and the next one, the offensive line rankings, I get both of those from Football Outsiders. And it's just different metrics. I know for the DVOA, they've got it for offense, defense, and special teams. Specifically here, what I'm looking for is the DVOA, the defensive DVOA of the matchup. So first 2 columns are for the player themselves, the fantasy production. The next 2 are the defenses that they're facing. An O-line is the offensive line rank, and it separates it, for receivers and tight ends. I'm looking more for the adjusted sack rate. How are they in pass protection? But for the running backs, I'm looking at the adjusted line yards. And again, this is all from Football Outsiders. You get all those metrics and rankings. Then I look at the team itself. So the O-line and the implied total really looks at the team itself that the player is on, and it's what is the so from the over-unders and the spreads, what is the implied total that the odds makers are projecting for this particular team? So obviously you want the players that are going to be on teams that score the most points. So what do those projections for the week look like? This next one, yard per team attempt. And this is a stat from Peter Howard, who does, my spreadsheets are pretty basic. Like his, I mean, even he says his are pretty basic too, but his are quite more advanced than mine. But he does a lot of statistics football wise. But one of the ones that I know he highlights a lot and that I like because it goes with specifically just the yards, and it says yards per team attempt. So based on the running or passing of the team, like the attempts that they're doing there, whether it's rush attempts or pass attempts, how many yards does that particular player have to account for on all those attempts? And so what I like about it is that it isn't reliant on any particular scoring setting. This doesn't relate directly to fantasy points, but it shows that which players are more responsible for their yardage on their particular team, and that should lead to fantasy production. So I like it because you can plug it in regardless of the scoring settings or league, because it's not based on the fantasy points itself. It's based just on the yards and the team attempts, and that's not going to change based on scoring. I mean, that's what the NFL teams are doing. So what I like about it is just a good comparison for players, like irregardless of position, to how responsible they are for their offense. And yes, yards aren't everything in fantasy football. Obviously touchdowns are huge, but then again, there is somewhat of a correlation between yards and touchdowns, and there's averages. I think it's like there's a touchdown for not for quarterbacks, but for rushing and receiving yardage. I think it's a touchdown every 155 yards, and that's like a decade long average. I know, again, Peter Howard figured that one out. So kudos to Peter Howard this morning. Apparently, it's the Peter Howard appreciation episode. But anyway, so yards per team attempt, anyways, I think is a great stat to kind of compare different positions too, because it's the same regardless if it's a running back or wide receiver, right? We're just looking at the total yards from scrimmage. And again, thinking that average of 155 yards per touchdown, the players with more yards likelier to get touchdowns. So that's kind of where that is. And then here it's red zone carries and targets. So I've got it, carries, targets, and then I also highlight, like especially for the running backs, like Ramondre Stevenson here or J.D. McKissick, the carries inside the 5-yard line. Important. And then the goal line guide, or the goal line grade, from the goal line guide that I showed last week. And it's basically it's something that uses this implied total. So this almost gets double counted, but it's not entirely just the implied total. So the implied total, but also based on teams' offensive efficiency inside the 5-yard line compared to their opponent's defensive efficiency at the same situations. And I do separate that running, passing. So for the pass catchers, so receivers, tight ends, I'm using the team's passing goal line grade, and for running backs, I'm using the team's rushing goal line grade. A little bit of, that's not the perfect science, because running backs will catch passes, so should they factor into the team's receiving grade? So that's where, a little bit of adjusting there. But anyway, so what I do is I just plug all those numbers in, and then I kind of see, and what I've done here is, whoever's the highest of that particular stat, I'll put in green. Whoever's the lowest, I'll put in red. And that's what these numbers are here. It's kind of just the difference between the green and the red. And so obviously you want players with more green. I'm putting that as the higher stats. So more. So that's one of the ways, like, just kind of break it down. Okay, you've got all these stats, and how do you break it down? But I feel like there's, again, 9 factors I look at. Player production, technically there's 3 of them, the floor and ceiling, as well as the yards per team attempt. 2 on the defense, the defensive rankings in the DVOA, and then 3 on the offense, or 2 on the offense themselves with the O-line rank and the implied total. And then the goal line grade is kind of a mix of both offense, like the team that the player's on, and also the defensive opponent they're playing that week, and going with the matchup. So you've got 3 that are for the player specifically, 2 for the defense, 2 for that player's offense, and then 1 that's kind of a hybrid of both defense and offense. I feel like it's pretty balanced out in terms of giving weight to everything appropriately. One thing I know I used to do last year was, as well as implied total, also the over-under, thinking, okay, the games that have a high over-under, it's going to be great anyway, but then it was giving too much to the actual game itself, not enough to the players. So I want to limit what stats I'm looking at. So that's why I chose yards per team attempt. But I wanted one more player-specific stat, and this one I think is brilliant that Peter Howard does that, and I think it encapsulates everything really well. And again, it's universal through running back, wide receivers, and tight ends. I mean, technically it's there for quarterbacks too, but the quarterbacks are always going to be so high because their passing yards account for so much. And I mean, you could do without the passing yards, just the quarterback rushing, but that's less important. But it's used as a really great way to compare between running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, kind of equal. So, okay, let's look at the first one. So I know Friends of Reality. This is actually both of these are contract salary cap leagues. I just love doing those. This one's a 12-team PPR with points per first down. And I know for the quarterbacks get boosted scoring points per completion and stuff like that, but obviously there's no quarterback. So I've got to start 2. And I know this is start 2 if Antonio Gibson plays. If Gibson's out, then I'm starting all 3 of these players, and this is almost kind of useless. But Demarcus Robinson, Henry Ruggs, Ramondre Stevenson. After Stevenson's good week last week, I almost had him as instinct, kind of set him in the lineup to start. But then I went and looked at the numbers. So in terms of production, it lies with Ruggs. I mean, he's got a floor and he's got a ceiling that's much better than anything Robinson or Stevenson has. So just based on these 2 alone, it almost made Ruggs the kind of automatic start. But I went through the process and see what I got. Defensive rankings, the best one belongs to Demarcus Robinson. The Titans are ranked 32nd, so they're dead last against wide receivers in the NFL. Now, how much of that is Robinson going to benefit from that, right? A lot of it's probably going to go to Tyreek Hill. And I mean, he's questionable too. So, and then Stevenson, decent. Ruggs, though, the Eagles have allowed the fourth fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. So, bad matchup for Ruggs in that sense. Looked at the DVOA as well, just the overall defense. And this is based on a percentage. So 0 is average. And actually, the Eagles are exactly 0 on defensive DVOA. So they're kind of an average defense overall. Now, the one thing, this isn't DVOA looked specifically at like wide receiver production or running back. It's just the defense in general overall. And then, so what you want to, so bad defenses that allow a lot of points are going to have positive DVOA, right? Because there's more offensive value to be gained above the average. So the Titans here have the worst defense apparently compared to the Eagles or the Jets, 9.3% compared to 4.2 for the Jets. So about twice as bad as the Jets defense overall. So point scoring there. So again, those are the fact that the defensive matchup favors Robinson. It hurts Ruggs probably the most, but definitely favors Robinson there. Looking at the offensive line, so for both the receivers, Robinson and Ruggs, it's adjusted sack rate. The Chiefs are 7th, the Raiders are 18th, but then you look at for Stevenson, especially for a guy, it's probably going to be, scoring a touchdown will be the big difference there. Can he get the goal line carry? So looking at the offensive line in particular, can they block for him to get that touchdown? They're 27th in adjusted line yards. So the offensive line has not been that great for the Patriots this year, especially in the run game in particular, which that really hurts Stevenson here. Notice that Stevenson, at this point doesn't really have any great stats that say yes in his favor, and then a couple that work against him. The implied total as well, even though the Patriots are favored in this game, their implied total is only 24.75 compared to 26 for the Raiders, and then 31.25 for the Chiefs. I mean, like, players for the Chiefs are obviously going to do well in these stats here. And then back to the player production, right? Yards per team attempt. So Henry Ruggs kind of smashes both Robinson and Stevenson, 1.94. And I believe this only counts the team attempts for games that player played in, not at the whole of the season. So again, Peter Howard, I think, does a really good job making it as fair as possible, not discounting players if they missed a game, for instance. So Ruggs up there at 1.94. Ramondre Stevenson at 1.92. And this is, I think, shows where it's, because, I mean, I think he was inactive for a couple games. And so that would have been one where those team attempts in those games don't count against his total for his yards to divide by those team attempts. So 1.29 is still pretty good. Demarcus Robinson at 0.061 or 0.61. Sorry, 0.061 would be awful. 0.61, not great, especially compared to the other two. So again, he's hurt there. I guess the one thing is, Henry Ruggs had the best at all the player production, which those are the three stats you're going to look at the most. Like, what's the player producing, and then like this yards per team attempts. So even though there might not be as many green categories for Ruggs, it kind of made it that Ruggs was going to be starting almost. Is he even worth being a decision in here, for instance? And then the red zone carries and targets. It's funny. Robinson and Ruggs each only have one red zone target, whereas Stevenson's he's a running back, right? So generally these stats do favor the running back. So if you're going to compare running back to wide receivers, that is the red zone area tends to be one spot that will always favor the running backs because they'll get more carries, they'll get more opportunities. One carry inside the 5, and guess what? It was last week he scored a touchdown. So efficient on it. But that's like the only spot where Stevenson could kind of set himself apart. Right, is that the fact that he'll get the red zone carries and he could get a touchdown. But the goal line grade actually has him at 56.25, the lowest of the three players, and not the highest goal line grade in particular. I know the Patriots have a high passing goal line grade. I think it's the third highest in the NFL this week. So I like a lot of their pass catchers, Henry, Johnny Smith, not Stevenson so much. I know he caught some passes last week, but the goal line grade definitely favors the Chiefs, 94.25 passing, and the Raiders are decent as well. So what it ended up with is the difference between the green categories where they were the highest and the red categories were the lowest. Robinson is 1, Ruggs is even, and then Stevenson is a -3. So it would definitely favor going Robinson and Ruggs there. This stat I also did was how many times, because I have to start 2, I also looked how many players are in the top 2. Like, how many times is a player in the top 2? Robinson was only 4 times in the top 2. Or sorry, that should be 5 times. And then same with Stevenson. And then whereas Ruggs was 6 times in the top 2. So Ruggs seemed to definitely be the favorite there. And then it really came down to Robinson or Stevenson. And then if you look at them head to head, the floor and ceiling's about identical. The defensive matchups do slightly favor Robinson. The O-line is a big difference. The implied total overall and the goal line grade, that's really where the big difference is happening. The yards per team attempt might be the one thing that would sway me towards Stevenson, but I'm sticking with Robinson this week, going with the wide receivers. Speaking of Chiefs receivers, another league I've got McCole Hardman, Michael Pittman. This is just kind of because it's just two players start one. It's a little easier. So what I do is just highlight in green who's the highest, and there are more by one, so not by much, more green categories for Pittman. Better production, better yards per team attempt, right? So those are the ones you really look at, like is the player production, and just because past production doesn't on its own indicate future production, but it is a good way to lean on, okay, what are they capable of doing, right? And I mean, you look at their absolute ceiling, the floors are pretty similar, 3.4, 4.4. Not absolute zeros like say Robinson or Stevenson, but McCole Hardman, his best season or best game so far this season, 12.1. With Pittman, it's 17.9 with these scoring settings, so a little better. Yeah, the DVOA in the offensive line favors the Chiefs. Same with the implied total. That's a big difference in terms of what expected for the Colts to play with. This is also one where if we find out Tyreek Hill's out, I'll probably pivot and play Hardman. But so far, like the way Pittman's been producing, because the thing is with the Colts, I mean, they're missing potentially T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell's out for the year. Pittman's probably going to see volume with those absences as well. They're both kind of involved in the red zone. The goal line grade, though, does favor the Chiefs again up there. So yeah, so really my toughest decision is this one. So this is just a pretty, I'm not gonna say standard, but pretty conventional 10-team half-point PPR league. Not pretty shallow rosters to where I can make these types of decisions too. Start two between Christian Kirk, Tyler Lockett, Henry Ruggs, J.D. McKissick. So going through, what ends up happening is the difference again between the green being the highest at a particular stat and the red being the lowest. Christian Kirk has a difference of 2, Lockett of -2, and then Ruggs and McKissick are even. Then I went and looked at, because it's start two, how many times are a player in the top two in a certain category. Ruggs led the way with 6 times in the top two, Kirk and McKissick with 5 each, and then Lockett with 4. So what the first thing I notice here is when there's multiple decisions to make, the one thing I try and do is, who do I either lock in as the starter or who do I eliminate as for sure I'm benching? And like the numbers are telling me Lockett is the must bench here with all these better options. I don't know, and I kind of modified his ceiling a little bit. His ceiling is actually much higher. It would be the highest of anyone. But what I did was I took his average highest game of the season, or I took his highest game of the season and averaged it out with his highest game with Geno Smith, thinking that realistically his ceiling isn't the same with Geno Smith as it is with Russell Wilson, and that average gave me an 18. So I kind of used that as the number here. Technically, it would change things a little bit. He would be just a -1, gaining an extra stat. But ultimately, I don't know that his ceiling is necessarily there. And the matchup, all the defensive stuff, the O-line, the implied total, none of that favors him at all. The goal line grade's not great. And so, yeah, to me, Lockett kind of became the first to bench. And then it was really decided between Kirk, Ruggs, and McKissick. I'm still not fully decided, I'll be honest, but I've kind of, as you see, I've highlighted in blue, kind of gone between Kirk and McKissick, thinking that even if Gibson plays, he doesn't look healthy. So I think McKissick should be started this week. I just feel like that's there's a lot of potential there. And if Gibson goes down, there's also a really safe floor in terms of volume. So then I tried to decide, okay, assuming I'm playing the running back, who are the wide receivers I want? And I kind of went through, and between Kirk, Lockett, and Ruggs, comparing those three, I like Kirk. I know a lot of it is based on the implied total. That this team is, 32.5. I believe it's the second highest implied total of the week. So expecting the Cardinals to score a lot of points. But this is kind of how I go through my lineup decisions. So again, if anyone has any lineup questions, feel free to ask them. And one thing I can do is I can go through it and plug in all the numbers for your players. And see like what if I was deciding using my spreadsheet, what would I go with? What decision would I make? So we're a little early still for the actives and inactives. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little DFS, and talk about. So last week what I did was, ask a question: can you make a 2 tight end lineup that looks viable? And I think, I did do one. I don't know that I remember tracking that lineup results and didn't do so great. So, but it was one of those where it completely killed you either. So I'm just gonna, I'll just go through a DraftKings lineup a little bit and see, what I've got some theories today on what I'd like to do. I'm going for two. I released a Yahoo DFS article. This will be on DraftKings here, but I know on Yahoo, one of the things I was really pushing, go with the Packers stack. Get that Green Bay stack in. I think Rodgers is going to do great this week, and it's not biased Packers fan. This Washington secondary is not great to begin with, but there are some injuries. It seems like William Jackson, who I believe is their number one corner, out. So not that was a great matchup anyway for Washington defensively. Him versus Adams, you're going to favor Adams, but I think this could be the type of week where the Packers put up 50 points legitimately. And like I'm not just saying like 50 as an exaggeration. Like I legit think we could see 50 points for the Packers this week, and so I kind of want to get in on them in DFS. I'm not there. I haven't really been high on the Packers in DFS this year yet, but I know on Yahoo that Rodgers and Adams were a little expensive. I think Adams was tied alongside Hill as the most expensive wide receiver, but like I have him ranked as my number one wide receiver this week, so it's fair to pay for that. And Rodgers, I think, has top 5 upside at a quarterback, and I believe he was just at prices. So we're going to take a look at DraftKings and see what can be done there. So let me. Sorry here, just gotta find it. So yeah, anyway, so I'm looking at the DraftKings pricing, and I see right the way at quarterback. I think it's where to start. You've got Kyler Murray at 8,500, Patrick Mahomes at 8,400. So that's kind of you pay up into the 8,000s to get either of those two or not. Kind of this week feel not, and I like some of these guys in the 7,000 range. So Tom Brady's at 7,700, Rodgers at 7,500, Lamar Jackson 7,400, Matthew Stafford 7,100, and Jalen Hurts 6,900. That's where I think I'd want to go, is that range there for quarterbacks. And not to see about Brady against the Bears, really be between Rodgers at 75 to Hurts at 6,900. Nice range, I think. So we'll go to the top of that range with Rodgers. I forgot to share. Sorry. I'll show the lineup being set. So so put Rodgers in, and then I think if you're going to play Rodgers, Adams is at 8,900. That's expensive, but let's try it. It is possible to do with the Rodgers Adams stack. You could run it back with McLaurin. He's only 6,900. That's a nice price. Man, Jamar Chase at 62. That seems really good. I've been mostly doing Yahoo stuff. So it'll be kind of a bit of an experiment here, doing a lot of CFL DFS more than on DraftKings. So let's do the running back. Let's do the Rodgers to Adams stack, running back with McLaurin. He doesn't have an injury, so he's playing today, and we'll see if Gibson's playing or not. But I think McLaurin should do fine regardless. And the next step is actually look at running backs. No, on Yahoo this week, I think the secret saw Darrell Henderson, 6,600, Joe Mixon, 6,500. I think those two are the two you really want. What I've noticed here, Josh Jacobs at 6,200. I feel he's a lot closer to them here than he is on Yahoo. He was below the $20 mark. I thought Josh Jacobs was a great value on Yahoo DFS, but for now, I kind of like Darrell Henderson here at 6,600. I think that's a great price. So we're going to put him here. And then always look at the tight ends at this point. So what do you have to work with? I know Waller's questionable, so that's not the great. We're going to avoid Waller, especially he's less than he's 1,000 less than. He's less than 1,000 less than Kelsey. So you may as well be able to pay up for Kelsey at that point. At 70 doable. Andrews at 6,000. Kind of like, what's the comparison between Jonnu Smith is 2,800 compared to Hunter Henry at 4,100. A $2,000 difference to me is too much. So I don't really want to go with Henry there, but I kind of like these other guys at this 4K range here. Goddard, Higbee. Already going with Henderson. I think Goddard makes the most sense. So let's try. I know he's going to be active this week for the first time since he got COVID, but I think that's if you go back to the goal line grade this week, the Eagles have the highest passing wise, and he leads the team in red zone targets. Goddard is tied with Kenneth Gainwell for the team lead in red zone targets. That's crazy that Gainwell is actually tied for the Eagles lead in red zone targets. But with Ertz out especially, I think Goddard's just going to get types of targets. So I think that's kind of a good lineup. 3,800 left. What kind of defenses can you just cheaply? Eagles against the Raiders, especially if Waller's out, maybe that offense struggles to go. Jets, there's nothing else I really like defensively here. Ravens at 2,900 maybe. Yeah, who are the elites? Yeah, oh, my God. So one thing on Yahoo is they do not have the Rams as the highest priced defense in the middle of the pack. I think it's an automatic play. Here, the Rams are 5,000. That's getting a little extreme. I think that's a little too much. Patriots at 34 seems like a good play. Packers at 33 as well. But to go for a cheap defense, let's just throw the Eagles in, 2,300. Maybe the Raiders struggle if Waller's out. So that leaves 4,400 to do for a running back, a wide receiver, and a flex. I'm going to check flex-wise. Who are the players of that range? If you kind of go with the average of that. Oh, Devontae Freeman. So here's the 4,400 range. You got Mark Ingram, Rondale Moore, Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Freeman. Yeah, Freeman at running back. That's really cheap. Who are the other running back? Who are the other cheap running backs for 4,400? Bell's actually more expensive than Freeman. That's surprising to me. I would expect, because Freeman's expected to serve as the starter. So I'm surprised Bell is more expensive than Freeman personally. I know Bell scored a touchdown last week. I don't know if it's all based on that. A.J. Dillon at 4,600. Again, if you think the Packers are going to do well, I don't want to overstack this lineup with Packers, but he would be a great play if you weren't already stacking Rodgers. And I could have also just put him in, thinking that if the Packers score 50, you want maybe more than just Rodgers and Adams. Kissick at 5,000, especially if Gibson's out, that could be. I thought I already saw Damian Williams back there. Daryl Williams at 58. That's getting up there. I like his price a lot more on Yahoo, so I'd avoid Daryl Williams. Not really much great running back value. I think Freeman at 4,400 is a great play. So let's put that in there. And then from there, you've got about that average 4,400 to fill in wide receiver and a flex. So in that range, you could look for guys like, Rondale Moore isn't horrible. If you think the Cardinals, it'd be a great way to buy into the Cardinals. McCole Hardman, a cheap way to buy into the Chiefs. Lazard, if you want to overload with a Packer, Lazard might be a good play. Sony Michel at 4,200, not horrible. Yeah, I feel like this 4,400 range, there's good players. So basically the whole point to prove this was it's viable to have these three in a lineup together. I think here's Henderson Adams is kind of how I want to start a lot of DFS lineups. A QB, running back, wide receiver. I got that quarterback to wide receiver stack. I got Henderson, who I think is going to do great this week at a pretty cheap price at 6,600. Mixon's kind of I'm more worried about that defense, the Ravens defense, than I am the Lions defense. The Lions have allowed the most fantasy points to running backs. I know at least in half-point PPR. I'm not sure about. Actually, usually it says it here. Oh, yeah. They've full-point PPR as well, the most fantasy points. But yeah, those are the three I kind of want to set lineups with. Aaron Rodgers, Darrell Henderson, Devontae Adams. So I kind of go with DraftKings lineups with those three, I think, or Yahoo lineups as well. Like DFS, I think those are the three players you want. Kev Wheeler, I know, who's a big supporter of a lot of different streams. I know I see him in the Goat District chat a lot when they're in their live shows. Appreciate it, Wheeler. Talk about Arizona defense. I guess you're saying against Houston. Yeah, I also think they're a good price. And yeah, McKissick in that range. Actually, just going back to that lineup, rather than running it back with McLaurin, McKissick, if he catches enough passes, he might be a better run it back option than McLaurin. You get that cheap running back in for $5,000 and maybe spend at other receivers in that range instead of McLaurin. So I know I already talked about earlier, Wheeler. There's a league where I'd be starting McKissick today. Cover guys like Christian Kirk, Ruggs, Lockett. McKissick kind of seems like the one to play there. So if you ever want to talk through any of your decisions, Wheeler, feel free. And yeah, thumbs up. Hopefully, I mean, thumbs up for the show here that I'm doing good. Actives, I think we're. I'll take a look now. I usually like to wait till I find all the teams will be reported by 11:45. So I'll take a look now. It might not be fully updated. Some teams might have been a little earlier. Some teams not yet. We are week 7. I typed in the wrong. Supposed to be the numbers, guys. Knowing numbers, but apparently not. Let's see here. Just give it a second to load, and we'll see if everything's updated. You can kind of get through that and dissect and decisions. I know there's a few big players kind of questionable at this 1 o'clock slate, questionable later as well. Getting there, not quite. For like the Ravens are out, but stuff we already knew, right? We knew they already ruled Latavius Murray out early. They already ruled Sammy Watkins out as well. So we'll give it a few more minutes. But I guess this might be a good time to talk theory on like what to do with not so much theory, and very specific, Darren Waller. Right? He's questionable at 4 o'clock, and it's tough to know for sure if he's going to play, right? And so let's say you have a backup to Waller. If at 4 o'clock to p.m. Eastern today or later, you're not necessarily going to know if Waller's playing when you have to make that decision. If your backup tight ends at 1 o'clock, so for anyone with Darren, I think what you want to do now is actually go look for those players that are playing at those times. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games to choose from at 4 o'clock p.m. Eastern today or later. You look direct Eagles Raiders game. I mean, you obviously have to look for people who will likely be available, right? So Foster Moreau, I mean, if Waller's out, Moreau should be the starting tight end there. That's maybe who you like. That could be an easy like plug and play replacement. And again, check for availability if he's on the waivers or not. But I think that's a good play. Lions, Rams. I mean, both of the main tight ends are going to be probably started everywhere. So I don't know if there's any you're interested in any of the backups there. Moreau would. So like Foster Moreau is kind of the benchmark, right? Can you find a player better than Foster to plug in? If not, and you have Waller, go pick up Foster Moreau. That would be kind of the play. Technals. I mean, you maybe have Farrell Brown for the Texans. Cardinals have been really good at defensively against tight ends this year, so I don't. From the Cardinals themselves, I mean, if Zach Ertz might be, that could be viable. That's at the point where he and Moreau might be on equal footing, and it's personal preference. You prefer the Ertz just because the Cardinals are again projected to score. Like now they're 18-point favorites. This spread just keeps going up, but like they're projected to score over 30 points. So you want tight ends and offense a ton. What's the Raiders implied total? So it's about average, whereas the Cardinals are I think the second highest spread second highest implied total this week. Ertz might be a good option. Bears and Buccaneers. Cameron Brate I suppose could be a decent option for the Bears. Cole Kmet. That's one where it's probably not available. Even Ertz might not be available. Kind of those are your options for Waller. So either Moreau, Ertz, Kmet, Cameron. 49ers, Colts. I don't really know if there's anyone that game you'd want. Same with Saints, Seahawks. That's tricky. So I think stick to those like 4 players. If you try and get Foster Moreau, Zach Ertz, Colt Kmet, or Cameron Brate. If you can get one of those 4, wait till 4 o'clock, and if Waller's inactive, just plug that other player in. And yeah, if you're stuck and you have to make those decisions now, that's trickier. I know Wheeler's agreeing with me that Moreau a solid start if Waller out. I don't know if Wheeler about those 4 names I mentioned. If Ertz, Brate, Kmet, if like you think Foster Moreau would be the best play over all 4 of those guys. And I mean, to be fair, those other guys might not be available, and someone who has Waller may have to pick up Moreau. But yeah, I agree. I should do well enough. I already talked earlier about like Ruggs, how the Eagles are really good so far this year against wide receivers in particular. So that might be something where the Raiders want to go regardless of who it is, whether it's Waller or Foster Moreau. So, yeah, I think Moreau should be in play. But yeah, that's how I kind of approach that. I know one situation that's kind of tricky for a late game, not sure yet, is Alex Collins. And so, yeah, so Wheeler's saying Moreau above them. If Waller's out, he'll take Foster Moreau above Zach, above Cameron Braid, above Cole Kmet. So, Wheeler's approval on Foster Moreau. He should be solid. I know I saw in one of my group chats, Scott Connor, someone who I always kind of references being super smart. He was kind of saying like he thinks Waller's got, or Moreau has top side if Waller's out. So yeah, I think Moreau would be a solid play. Heck, I mean, if let's say you're streaming tight ends, that might be the guy you go after. But yeah, I think right. The Ertz matchup's great, especially the amount of points they should score. But first game there, they show out, meaning it could be run heavy. I know I prefer James Conner this week over Chase Edmonds for that reason. Just because, this could be a game script where Conner gets 20 carries and they don't really have to pass the ball very much. Sorry about that. Just having a bit of stream issue. Hopefully you can all hear me back here. But yeah, and yeah, Wheeler saying Connor's a great play this week as well. So yeah, I every like in all my season long leagues, I'm starting Connor everywhere I have him. I don't have any Edmonds, so I don't know that I make that decision. I know my friend Akili was kind of debating Tyler Lockett, Chase Edmonds, who's the final start and who's the bench there, and that one's tricky because we're not so confident with Lockett with Geno Smith, but I could really see the game script just kind of forcing Edmonds off. Yeah, Wheeler, I'll try to work on that. Maybe I'll try and get active and active now. It looks like most teams are there. So we're gonna start there. Hopefully this comes a little better. I think I'm back. I think I'll be going good now. In terms of inactives so we'll start with the Falcons. There's not fantasy relevant in terms of running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Frank Darby's inactive. I feel like the only reason he might have been active 2 weeks ago was because Calvin Ridley didn't travel with the team to London. He's playing today, so that's I think maybe why Darby's out. Raven, key defensive players here that affects like the Dolphins, for instance. But I don't really see anything with the Ravens. Latavius Murray, Sammy Watkins out. For Latavius Murray, that means I think Devontae Freeman's. Okay, yeah, surprising one here. Ramondre Stinson out. I did this before he came on. I did this whole section on like who to start between Robinson, DeMarcus Ruggs, and Stevenson, and I chose to not play Stevenson, but now I guess I don't have a choice now. So yeah, so the tricky one there is so Stevenson out. Thanks for updating there. Bengals, not really seeing anything in particular. Packers, Kevin King's out at corner. We're going to be starting, I guess, Rasul Douglas again. So it's Rasul Douglas, Oaks, not so it should be decent enough for McLaurin. Whoever's the other perimeter receiver, I don't know if it's Diami Brown, maybe, might be okay for them as well. If Adam Humphrey's in the slot, he's corner matchup with Chandon Sullivan. So avoid the slot receiver for Washington today, I think. In terms of Packers players, so fantasy-wise, nothing to mention there. For the Chiefs, not really seeing anything either. Laurent Duvernay-Tardif continues to be out. He's missed a lot of the season, so I feel. But I mean, last week Darrell Williams was fine running, so I think he'll help the run game when he's there. But without him, it's not detrimental. Like that offensive line is deeper than it was last year. So for the Dolphins, Devontae Parker's out. I know that was kind of news we were maybe expecting. Wheels up for Waddle, who's kind of entered into like every starter territory. But I think this also might be good. Gesicki. I mean, I don't. Preston Williams, if you're absolutely desperate, might be playable. Tough to fully trust him. But yeah, I think that's Parker being out. I think Parker would against the Falcons if he was active. So I might have him going in one league where I'll have to replace him after the stream. And as Wheeler kind of informed us, Ramondre Stevenson is out. So should be a good week for Damian Harris, right? I mean, he should do for himself, and Brandon Bolden's going to be maybe there to catch passes, but against the game against the Jets, maybe that's not as important to them. So look for a lot of Damian Harris. I think I had him ranked at RB24 the week. Maybe should be a little higher, to be honest. So that was a debate my co-host Brad and I had on the fantasy potty. I think he had him in his top 12 even, so wouldn't go that high, but probably should be inside 20. So Damian Harris maybe should take a look. I'll update those rankings shortly. This was also maybe expected news for the Giants to be without their top three receivers. Kadarius Toney, Galladay ruined out. Galladay. Galladay just ruins everything. No. Toney already ruled out yesterday, but now we're hearing Sterling Shepard is also out. So Darius Slayton is the number one Giants wide receiver. And Barkley's also, I mean, Devontae Booker is probably maybe the only Giants player worth playing. One thing, though, they do get is they do have Evan Ingram active. And with everyone else injured, I know Ingram's not 100%, but I mean, he might be playable as a tight end this week. He might not have a choice. So I think Evan Ingram being in is at least for the Giants. And I mean, he might have to see targets just because and that volume. For the Jets, Tevin Coleman, Tyler Kroft, both inactive. I mean, really for the Jets, Coleman, I don't know that he's done too much this year. It really does seem like, at least this week, it's going to be Michael Carter and Ty Johnson. Against the Patriots, I don't know that I think Michael Carter, if you're absolutely desperate, you can play him. Actually, that one league I have where I've got to take out Parker out of the line, Michael Carter might be the replacement there, so I might be desperate enough to play him. For the Titans, I know Chess is inactive, but looking like Julio Jones is playing. And I know last week Josh Reynolds was a healthy scratch. Looks like he's going to. I'd play Julio in this matchup against the Chiefs. I know he's not 100%. Also, and AJ Brown's playing. I think that was one where he was questionable. We kind of sense he was going to play, knowing that it was after effects of what appeared to be food poisoning. So nothing really like with Julio. I believe it is a hamstring soft tissue issue. So again, I think I've only got Julio in one league, and I'll play him. And I've also just been maybe not enough choices else otherwise, but at least we know Julio's in and playing today. And I guess the big news: Antonio Gibson active. So they've got their inactive players: Curtis Samuel, Cam Sims, Jay Sternberger, also William Jackson. I think I mentioned that earlier. Offensive guard Brandon Sheriff as well, but with Jackson makes that secondary even weaker. And I think what this does is suddenly you force, I guess is it Kendall Fuller, I guess, who would be covering Adams. I mean, Jackson or Fuller on Adams, Adams probably wins often than not anyway. There's really not any one guy that can kind of cover him one-on-one. But what this does is suddenly it forces, instead of Fuller being on the second best receiver, now it's the, I believe a Canadian, he's I think going to be on. I guess I don't know if he'll play in the slot, maybe cover Cobb, but I think what it does is those trickle down effects is suddenly Cobb have much better matchups than they would have had before. Whereas again, Adams, whether it's Jackson or Fuller, that doesn't matter. I think with Adams, you're more just worried about are they going to triple cover him. And if they do, it for everyone else. So the whole point is, I think especially in DFS, Lazard, Cobb, I think are viable, but some season-long lineups where I'm starting those guys just to get them in. But yeah, the news here, again, big news. Antonio Gibson active is kind of the great play. And okay, so first off, a couple of comments here from Wheeler saying Damian Harris is RB13. So he definitely agrees with, and not so much with me on my ranking. We'll see. I do think that the Patriots might go through the air one as well. The Jets defense seems more vulnerable through the pass than they are through the run, and at least through the goal line guide, their efficiency near the 5-yard line and where the touchdowns could be had. I kind of think it'll be more passing touchdowns for the Patriots this week. So I've ranked Harris a little lower. Maybe I'm too low on him though. We'll have to see if I'm crazy or a genius. And yeah, mentioning Sterling Shepard out, that's a big one again. I think him being out, it means coverage towards Evan Ingram, but I think more targets, so it helps Evan Ingram. But talking about Shepard out, you mentioned Dante Pettis, right? Yeah, as opposed to, I said Slayton, right, as the number one receiver. It probably is Dante Pettis, actually. I think I might be playing him in a spot or two. So, fire up Pettis. John Ross was also questionable. He'll be playing. So, Dante Pettis, John Ross is the top two Giants receivers. Who thought we were same point this year? But here we go. This is week 7 by apocalypse, and everything's kind of crazy. So so whether it's Wheeler or anyone else watching, if you have any questions for yourself, lineups, feel free. But yeah, I think that covered all the teams. Let me see. Oh, did I miss somebody? Oh, missed Carolina. Sorry. Forgot about Carolina. They've just added theirs. So Terrace Marshall's out. Again, that was something we knew beforehand. Do you go back to Robbie Anderson this week? I think I will be. A couple spots, and I think I'll play him. Maybe not absolutely everywhere, but he had 11 targets last week, right? And with 11 targets, going to get more than 11 yards receiving? Maybe. Wasn't the case last week, but at least touchdown. And yeah, I think we were saying both are worth the dart. I think he's saying Pettis and John Ross when I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Wheeler. But yeah. So so with Marshall out, Anderson becomes playable. The tight ends are probably more playable if you're desperate enough for a tight end. Again, some early morning options like 1:00 p.m. options. It's still morning here. It's not noon Eastern yet, so I can still let's say you're not as confident Evan Ingram with all those other players injured, thinking he's not 100%. Maybe Tommy Tremble or who am I also thinking of? Who they got rid of Dan Arnold. So yeah, Tommy Tremble might. I guess they still have Ian Thomas, but he hasn't really been doing much. But those guys might be worth dart throws if you're desperate for a tight end. Maybe you'd rather go, especially in that same game, rather scoring team, the Panthers, and go with a Tremble or a Thomas, and Ian Thomas, as opposed to going with Evan. So that might be one thing. But I know Wheeler's thinking that Robbie Anderson should redeem himself this week. I tend to agree. I think it's a favorable defense going up against the Giants. I don't know that they've got the horses really to stop him. So yeah, I believe the teams. I think everyone's been added now. I don't see any other additions. So yeah, so that's the updated active inactive list. So again, the big names to be aware of: Sterling Shepard's out. Ramondre Stevenson, running back, is out. So there's a few wide receivers for the Giants that are out. Kenny Golladay, Sterling Shepard, Kadarius. So for the Patriots, for Stevenson being out, even though again, I'm a little lower on Harris this week, but I still had him as a top 24 running back. So he should be started no matter what anyway. So that's not really going to affect that. Probably would raise him up in my rankings with this news. And then for the Giants, again, Evan Ingram might get more target. I think we already mentioned it. Dante Pettis, John Ross, those are the viable replacements there. What other big news was in terms of inactives? I guess some of the bigger news was the players who are playing. So I already mentioned Evan Ingram. Antonio Gibson's in. That's a guy where he's going to be limited. It seems like they're going to be maybe a 60-40 split, but Packers defense is vulnerable, and Gibson's one of those players where you invested in him, so you almost I know that where I've got him, I'm starting him, right? I can't take it up. Part of it is I don't have Ramondre Stevenson to replace him with, but Gibson's one of those guys where he's going to be limited. He's still going to be played every week. I think McKissick is worth playing as well, and so I think Gibson's in. McLaurin in, Ricky Seals-Jones is in. Those guys I think are all kind of every week starters anyway. Julio Jones is playing, and AJ Brown's playing, and Brown's an every week starter. Julio, I know he's been a little disappointing, but I'd still play him this week. Again, against the Chiefs, this is the type of game where you'd want to play Julio. If he fails to do the game, then you can start benching Julio every week, or maybe even dropping him if it's redraft. Even Dynasty might be droppable. No, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't drop Julio, but I'm definitely starting him this week against the Chiefs. I think this is a bit like what Reeler was saying with the Robbie Anderson redemption game. This might also be a Julio redemption game here against the Chiefs. Devontae Parker out again. I think the only one that might boost up to where you might have played them where you otherwise wouldn't have was Press, because I think Jalen Waddle, like I've got Jalen Waddle in my top 20 receivers this week. Might even be in the top 15. But I think he'll do so well against the Falcons. Mike Gesicki as well. Like those are guys where I was high on them whether Parker was playing or not. But with Parker out, if you're desperate enough, I think you can. Preston Williams. Wheeler's got an interesting comment here talking about Evan Ingram being a good call to play. They should be before the trade deadline. So to that point, you're right, really, like where they might feature him extra, kind of up his value, and maybe, instead of getting a fifth round pick for him, get a fourth or whatever. I don't know what the actual value is for Evan Ingram right now from NFL circles, but again, they might not even have a choice. You've got Pettis, you got Ross, you've got Ingram, you've got Slade. I feel like a lot of targets are going to those four players, and I guess it depends on the game script. If Giants end up like leading for a lot of this game and winning, then it obviously falls a lot back on Devontae Booker. I don't know. I think they're underdogs at home. I don't know if everyone's disrespecting them too much. It feels like the Panthers probably a better chance to win this game. So good game script for those Giants pass catchers. My final 5 here, 5 minutes before I head off. And again, give everyone the lineups and do so myself. The big news: Antonio Gibson, Julio Jones, AJ Brown. They're all playing. But yeah, Ramondre Stevenson, kind of a surprising inactive, and that doesn't seem injury. It seems healthy scratch. So is there something in the matchup against the Jets they don't like? Is it talk about them maybe wanting a more pass heavy script as well? Right? If they felt like this is a game where they lot, maybe more Stevenson, but if it's a game they want to pass more, they don't feel like they're going to use him as much. Maybe that's me looking too much into it. And my goal line guide, the goal line grade, I had such a high grade for the Patriots passing this week. I think touchdowns are coming through the air. Like I think I have Hunter Henry at tight end 7 this week. I do so well. This could finally be the week Jacoby Myers scores a touchdown. Frankly, it probably won't be. Who are we kidding? But yeah, so I guess the big inactives this morning: Sterling Shepard, Ramondre Stevenson, Devontae Parker, Terrace Marshall, I guess. Not really a redraft huge play, but more of a dynasty huge play. But yeah, those Tevin Coleman, that was the other guy I meant. Not that I don't think too many people are rushing to play Tevin Coleman, but it might just mean more volume for Michael Carter. Michael Carter, a bit more of a viable play. And yeah, Wheeler giving the peace out message, which is basically a great way to end this, I think. So you can follow me on Twitter at Senra Says. Also, I'm part of the Full Press Coverage. I co-host that podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at FPC_fantasy pod. I know Pin Tweet is the latest episode. My co-host Brad and I, we did our rankings debate like we do every week. Talked about the players we're most different on in our rankings, and yes, Damian Harris was talked about a lot. I'm the Damian here, and to be fair to Brad, he was really high on Damian Harris before Sony Michel got traded, so he's been really high on Harris really all calendar year. Makes sense for Brad to have him inside his top 12 this week, and so check out that debate. We talked about a few other players. There's also a poll which is related to the episode with really Justin Fields this week. I'm super high on Fields. I've got him at QB9. Part of it is I know he hasn't finished there yet this year, but part of it is also there aren't that many great quarterbacks. Like half of the top 6 is on bye this week. Russell Wilson's hurt. Other guys that maybe could jump up, like a Trevor Lawrence is on bye. Ben Roethlisberger. I don't know if I'd go up that high with Ben, but there's a lot. And the ones that are playing are kind of in some tough matchups, not the greatest situations. So I have Fields at QB9 this week, whereas Brad is not sold on Fields at all for this week against the Bucs. He has him at QB24. So you can vote on that poll. Do you more agree with me at Fields at QB9, Brad with Fields at QB24? So definitely appreciate everyone for checking that out, voting on those polls, and again, everything Full Press Coverage. Download the Full Press Coverage app to get everything Full Press Coverage content in one convenient location, and that app's available for free and iOS stores. So yeah, so this was Well, yeah, this was Fantasy Sunday live. Again, myself, Kyle Senra. I'll be signing out now. Appreciate we in the chats. Appreciate everyone for watching, listening, and we'll see you all next week. Bye for now. Enjoy your Sunday of football.